Hello, everyone. We are going to spend a little bit of time exploring the topic of animal research and herbal medicine this week. Uh, this is certainly one of those hot button topics, although it's typically more of a hot button topic when we're talking about animal research in general as a concept. And so I just wanted to start right here in the beginning and say that that is not the idea this week. We're not going to get into debating whether animal research is useful in pharmaceuticals or in other conventional medical treatments. We're talking about herbal medicine. So we're talking about animal testing in herbal medicine, and in general, what we're going to be talking about is animal testing that does harm the animal in some way. So I wanted to start a little bit with that concept that, if you are a an individual that is using herbs to optimize health in animals, that might be a slightly different thing. But we're talking about animal testing that may or may not be harmful to animals, that there's some kind of question in it. So this isn't about pharmaceuticals. It isn't about whether animal testing saves lives or any of those things. We are talking about how this applies to us as herbalists in what we do. One of the questions I'd like you to keep in mind as you do this is whether you will choose to cite animal research in your work as a professional. It's something I've thought a lot about personally and professionally, and I've chosen to abstain from citing animal research because my personal beliefs are that it's not necessary in herbal medicine. But let's take a look at some of the pros and cons and some of the arguments around it, and you can see what you think. So, as a little bit of a background, humans have been researching the efficacy of drugs and herbs on animals for a really long time, since about 500 BC. And what's interesting about this is that the concept of this comes from a lot of different religious doctrine, which makes human beings dominant over animals and other life forms on the planet. So there's a pretty direct correlation between the religious and cultural beliefs of a society that humans do dominate over the natural world, and the the implementation of animal research, because animals are ours to use or to eat or any of those things. So if you do have different beliefs, or you are in a culture that follows a different belief system, that those animal research may be questioned in a different sort of way. So in the U.S., 26 million animals do die from animal research, but a very small amount of this is on natural products. So let's take a look at some of the pros and cons that are out there for animal research, particularly ones that are relevant for herbal medicine. So the first one is that the animal research has contributed to many of the biggest life-saving cures that we've come across, as a pro towards animal research, and this is definitely um, true in many senses. But I think when it comes to a relation with herbal medicine hasn't been the pieces that have created these great cures, things like the advent of insulin or certain things like that. So I think that's a really hard one. That herbal medicine generally isn't a life-saving cure in the classic sense, as far as how a pharmaceutical could be. Um, well, let's look at a con. So one of the big cons is that herbal medicine, I mean, that animal research is cruel and inhumane. And I think that that's a hard one to debate. I think that's a pretty clear thing. Even if you are pro animal research, there is a certain element of cruelty and inhumane action taken against animals against their will. Um, it doesn't necessarily apply to herbal medicine, but it's a general concept. Another pro is that there's really no substitutes for a whole body living system. And I think this is a really relevant pro when you're looking at animal research in general. With herbal medicine, there is also some truth to this, that working with whole body humans is going to give you much more of a clear picture. And but this statement is kind of assuming that herbal medicine actually isn't, that you can't use humans in these things, that these are situations where we aren't actually able to use humans. So are there situations in herbal medicine where we can't use humans? Of course there are, situations around especially toxicology, and I would say toxicology is one of the big ones, and then also safety in pregnancy are some areas ethically. But for the most part, it was hard to think of a scenario where it would be unethical to give people herbal medicines just because they tend to be so safe. And especially if the dosage is kept correct. So another con against animal research is that there are a lot of different models now that we can use, and I think this is very true for herbal medicine. That there are other ways to explore questions. However, I think that herbal medicine is very complex, and so it is hard to extrapolate from in vitro research and so on. But as our models get more complex, as you'll be looking at some of the other ways, like artificial digestive tracts and things like that, other simulations, we are able to guess a little bit more. At the same time, we don't necessarily need to know mechanism as much as you might if you're going to be approving a pharmaceutical. So it's okay to have a little bit of mystery, just like there is with food and other multifactorial aspects of human health, contributors to human health. Another pro that's used a lot for pro animal research is that when it's unethical to use things in humans, then we need to use things in animals. And I think this is an interesting one when we come to herbal medicine, because of course it is somewhat the same, that if we have concerns of that it's not going to be safe in pregnancy or that it's toxic, then we can't necessarily use this in for herbal medicines in humans either. So what we tend to do is abstain from using it. But in a way, herbalists tend to err on the side of caution. I guess these things could be studied in animals, but again, that isn't always conclusive. Animal research and safety and toxicology doesn't always reflect directly to what human safety and toxicology is. And I think the other big piece is at what cost? Is it worth the cost of looking at these things, especially since we're able to analyze phytochemistry and chemistry pretty well? I mean, we have the capability of looking at a plant and saying this is definitely safe in pregnancy. There's nothing that's in marshmallow that you're going to be particularly concerned about in pregnancy. There's other things where it's pretty obvious that we might want to be cautious. So another con against animal research is that animals and humans are different, and this would be true with herbal medicine as well. What's an interesting dynamic of this is that animals do use herbal medicines naturally in their own wild environments, and likely with different rationale, but maybe not. And so we can learn from animals and from humans, but we are different. And as we were talking about with the toxicology or safety in pregnancy, it doesn't necessarily indicate that it is truly safe, even if it shows up safe in animals. The last couple of things, a pro for animal research is that animals don't have rights, and most animals don't have rights. And this is true. There are some animals have some very minimal rights, such as cats and dogs, horses, but most animals do not have rights, such as mice and rats, and a lot of the majority of 90, I think 95% of animals that are killed for animal research do not have rights. And so this is an interesting pro that's put out there that because they don't have rights, it's okay to do this. I would say that there's a huge con, of course, with there, and that I think herbalists have a view of the world that is a little bit more entire and integrative and cohesive, and we would think of nature, such as animals, to be perhaps more equal, perhaps we have an obligation to uphold the highest ethics that we can and do the least amount of harm. So, in the end, I think this all comes down to a risk benefit ratio that you need to think about this. On one hand, herbal medicines are super safe. So, it's really fine to experiment in some ways with people because there's not going to be a lot of harm done. Pharmaceuticals, nearly all pharmaceuticals or all pharmaceuticals have some kind of health cost to taking them, and so that there's a lot of ethics involved there. But if you're talking about something that's nutritious or healthy with an herbal medicine, if you're looking at whether nettles is going to be helping people with something, it's very unlikely that the nettles are going to be doing any harm. So it's that risk benefit ratio. At the same time, herbal medicines probably aren't going to be the next hugest cure like insulin or something along those lines where we're going to be able to have some kind of massive advent in medicine that will save millions of lives. Herbal medicines work differently than that. They've been around for a while. They have a more subtle, ingenious, and gentle action. So they're just not heroic in most senses. So after this, we are going to be looking at some other resources that present some different perspectives on animal research, especially some of the practicalities in the applicability of the data we gather from animals. So thanks for your listening and enjoy your week.